Good morning all. Welcome to the lecture 8 of Dbms SQL, right? So in the last 7 sessions we are discussing about the different aspects of SQL, and we started visiting the different classes of writing a retrieval query that we call by name a select query. There we have successfully discussed around 4 different classes of SQL. What all? So first we will try to recall the things, right? So as what we have discussed. The classes is what we have discussed in the last session is of SQL is select class. In the select class it allows to write a list of attributes in which that user wants to retrieve it, that means wants to display to the user, right? So such kind of attribute lists will write it in a select class, right? So other than that attribute list, even the select class also allows to write, that means the makes use of, even we can able to make use of that aggregate function like min, max, average, sum, count, right? All such things we can make use even in a select class possible. That means all aggregate functions are permitted to write it in a select class, right? So then after the next class we discussed is the from, right? The from class. In the from class usually we'll write the table names, right? So in which we are retrieving a data, we are writing conditions, right? So such table list we'll write it in a from class. There we are making use of even aliasing, that all we have discussed, right? The purpose of aliasing and all, fine. Then after this the next class we discussed is the where class, right? So what that where indicates, suppose if we want to check any conditions, during that time we will make use of a where class, right? So in the where class we will write that common attribute joining conditions, especially when a query requires that multiple tables to make use, right? Especially when retrieving, right? So during that time we will make use of a where class, right? Fine. Then after that in the previous session we discussed one more interesting topic of SQL, that is that means the one more class of a retrieval query, select query, that we called by name group by, right? So this is a new thing we discussed. So what is the purpose of group by? There are some situations where we want to retrieve the details, that means I want to apply an aggregate function on some set of attribute, on any attribute, right? So there I want to group it, I want the tuples, I want to group it separately. Then after that I want to apply an aggregate function individually, that means separately on each of the group, right? So that we have discussed. One such snap as what we have discussed is this one, right? So I will take you to the SQL, that is the practical part. So most of the time I think almost in all our SQL classes we are making use of that the practical way of learning the things, right? So that means we are executing the logic, the mathematically what that logic we are building, that first we are picturizing, we are representing it in terms of a picture or logic, right? So then after that we are coding, right? We are programming that picture, that is what we are doing. So the problem, the snap, as what we have discussed for the example of a group by class is could be this one, right? I want to count how many, in each language how many movies, right? Could be, this is what a question we have discussed. So there what we did is in each language, Kannada, English, Hindi, right? So in each language how many movies are present, that we are doing. So that requires, first we are how we are usually writing a query. First we are finding which all the tables are required to solve the query. Then after that we are doing so and identify tables which all the attributes plays a major role in writing a query, right? So there what we did is dynamically we want to group based on what? The language. In each language how many movies, right? So that's it. So first what we are doing, we are grouping based on a language, right? So then after we are counting, what to count. To identify each movie, in the movie table we are using what? MID. Either I can go with count start, that means only I want to go with counting a number of rows, but always try to, for count kind of an aggregate function, we can write a star kind of a argument. It's an indication that count simply how many rows are there, that itself is enough. But most of the time it is better to know what attribute to be written for each and every aggregate function, because that plays a major role in future, that I will discuss it in the today's session, fine, right guys, fine. So in the first group based on a language, then Kannada becomes one group and all Hindi becomes another group, right? Then apply a count, this how we solved, right? how that group by class works. That aggregate function, as what we have mentioned here, that means in the select class, that will be applied on each of the group as what it creates dynamically during the execution of a query, So on each of the group it applies individually, separately, then it performs that aggregate function value result and it displays to the user, right? So this is what one thing we discussed. So let us we'll try to write few more queries. So we'll try to take up, could be what a few of my friends might think that, oh, he's taking only a table like a director and movie, and with only those two tables he writing, discussing different things. No, it is, the major thing is to get the pulse of those classes, right? That means what exactly the usage of these commands, right? This each class. So once after knowing each and every class usage, then definitely we can write apply a same concept on multiple tables or any kind of a table, right? We'll get the things, right? We'll try to get the pulse of it, right? That's it. We'll try to take up one more scenario. For that, we'll try to write a query, guys, right? So we'll take up a problem like retrieve. I want to know each director directed how many movies? What is the question? Each director directed how many movies? That count I want. So what we did is, in the previous question, how I want to display is, I want to display a director ID, director name, then how many movies they have directed in each director has directed. That I want to get it, guys. To do that, definitely first we'll try to go in finding which all the tables are required. So prior to that, can we say by seeing this answer, that means the data values as what we are having, based on this, can we list out few things? Could be what things, a few things could be overlapping. So for that, I'll try to write it here separately. Select from where, then group by. So fine, could be fine now. So based on these two tables data, can we find out, can we predict what could be the answer first? We'll go with the bottom up approach. That means what, from the answer, we'll try to pick a solution, right? So each director directed how many movies? As per this data, what we can say is, usually what we'll do is, alone director table is enough to solve this problem? No, to solve this problem, usually always write a query by picking a ID. That means by holding the ID. Once if you are successful in getting the ID and finding its respective answer, then there is no big thing in getting its respective corresponding values. That means each director directed how many movies. If I know with the ID, directed 10, director ID 10, directed some 2 movies, 3 movies, something like that, then finding its respective name, 10 means what is the name? Then it's a very simple thing. How? Simply go to the respective table and try to join the table and retrieve the corresponding name values, right? So that's it. So as per this example, let us, which all the tables are required, guys? So the table is required is the director. No, it only having a director name. So to display director name, this table is required. Other than that, first, each director ID made how many movies, directed how many movies. If you want to get it, it requires a movie table, right? This is what a movie table. Based on this, can we say, guys, so each director directed how many movies, right? So this how we need to find out. So as per this data, definitely we can say, 10 present twice. Movie ID is a primary key. Anyway, definitely I cannot repeat. So for that 1, 2. So 10 with 2 movies, 10 connected with simple thing. Look at this one. This is a director ID, right? What are the director IDs we are having? First, 10 and 11. Fine. These are all the director IDs. Then 10 connected with which all the movie IDs? Movie ID 1, then movie ID 2. Fine. Next, these are all movie ID. Fine. 11 connected with what? Only one movie ID, that is 3. Fine. What's the next step, guys? Next step is to go for a counting. So actually it looks like a grouping, what we made actually? We made simply a group, right? So group, we created a group based on what? The director ID, right? So what's the director ID? 10. So 10 connected with 2 movie IDs, so this forms one group, and 11 connected with one more movie ID, that is 3, and that forms one more group, right? So do we have any further groups can we create? Definitely not, right? So what next? Apply the count, what I want, how many movies by each of the director, right? So count it, how much? I want to apply an aggregate function. What is that, guys? I want to count it 1, 2, 2 movies, fine. So what about this one? Only one movie, right? 1. So what exactly we did is, we used a movie table. Then after that, this is what a picture. We'll try to code this picture. That is what I am talking now, right? So to code this picture, what we need to make is, this requires, we created this group by visiting which table? We visited this director table. Yes, we visited the table called director, no, this one is what? A movie, right? So even that also required, we'll take up to display their name first. To get this answer, 10 with 2, 11 with 1, to get this answer, what we used is a movie table, right? So let me write, the table used is movie. Let me call it by name and aliasing movie fine. Then after this, usually whatever the table name I have used, what we are going to use, so that always to be written where, guys? In the from class, right? So let me write that from here, from movie, fine. So what's the next step we did? So we visited movie, yes, movie we took. What's the next step as per the image, as per the picture? What we did is, we grouped, based on, we created a group, right? To create a group, what is required? Group by, right? Group by, yes. In the group by class, we created a group based on which attribute? The interesting attribute, the attribute which is used to create a group dynamically is the DID, director ID, right? Based on director ID, we form this as one group and this as another group, right? So like this, that's it. So group by what attribute to be written here? DID, yes, DID. DID belongs to which table? Movie table, DID, because here also we are having a DID, but we have not mentioned, no issues, but always try to have making use of an aliasing and usage of that aliasing in the corresponding attribute where we'll write, right? Where all we write, fine. Next, what's the next step? Once if I write, automatically things becomes this part of the picture we have achieved, guys, with the help of these 2 lines of code. From movie, create group by DID, that's it. What is the next step? Next step, we are doing something. What is that? We are counting, we are counting, yes. We are counting. Counting what? Counting a DID? No, we are counting what? Movie ID is fine, right? So counting a movie ID. Let me write count. Because that count also I want to display, Anything if I want to display, where to write? To be written always in the select class, because I want to display it, that one. So let me write count. Where to write? Select class. Select, fine, select count. Count what? Count MIDs. Let me write MID. But this MID belongs to which class, which table? This MID belongs to this 1, 2 or all belongs to which table? Movie table. So movie means what? M. Let me write M.MID. So that I'll get 2, 1, this kind of a count, right? But this 2 belongs to whom? Corresponding to which director ID, and 1 belongs to this count belongs to which director ID. That also I want to display, right? So what to do? To display DID, write this DID where? In the select class, because that thing, the DID I want to display. Let me write the DID, fine, separated by comma, right? Then after this, DID belongs to which table? That is movie table. M dot, this is a DID, right? Movie. M dot DID. That's it, right? So let me write this code. First, what we used is from. We went to the from class. There we decided which table is required. We said movie table is required. Then after that, we said it is required to group based on what? Director ID, each director directed how many movies? M dot DID, fine. Then after that, we went to the select class, then we counted, right, we counted. After grouping, we started counting. Then that count I want to display. What we are counting actually? We are counting the MIDs, right? So let me write M dot MID. This I want to count. It displays me only the counts, but these counts belongs to corresponding which DIDs, that also I want to display. So for that, what to do? Go to along with the count, display even M dot DID also. That's it. We'll get the thing, right? Select M dot DID along with the count, right? That's it. This is what the same query we have written, we got the answer. Fine. But in the question I have asked, I don't want DID, or you have even DID, but along with that, the major intention of me is to know the name of a director also. 10 means what is the name, right? 11 means what is the name? That I want to print. To print it, so I know the DID, I want to get its corresponding name. To get it, where to visit? Do we have the director name in the movie table? No, So director names are present in the director table. That means without making use of a director table, I cannot guess or I cannot display the corresponding director name. So that this query requires a one more table. What is that? The director table, right? So let me write director. Let me call my name some D. Fine. Aliasing. That means we are having a DID. Suppose when you ask, hey Mr. DID 10, what is your name? Suddenly it says, it takes me to the table of director and compares the director table director ID with that, and it tries to match with its common attribute. That means this is what we made it as a common attribute. That means a foreign key where it acts like a bridge between the two tables, right? So that's it. So that means now I am having a DIDs here, DID, right? So I want to know its name. This is a DID obtained from which table? From movie table. Look at this one, guys. From movie table. Because in the from class we have written only one table. What is that? Movie table. That means this DID represents movie table DID. Now to get its corresponding name, I want to join this with, that means movie table with director table and with common attribute. What is that? This DID, that means movie dot DID, M dot DID should be equal to what? I want to get, this is equal to what? Common attribute condition. Otherwise it becomes what? Cartesian product, where it consists of non-spurious, that means spurious tuples, unrelated things. So for that, always to be written, always when I write a two table names, better you go with, always you go with what? Writing a joining attribute condition. That means a common attribute condition. Fine. M dot DID should be equal to what? Director table DID. D dot DID. D dot DID. D means director. Director dot DID. Oh, this is a condition we have written, where to write? Always this has to be written. The conditions to be written where? In the where class, right? So that's it. That I will tell you. That itself is enough? No, I want to display that corresponding name. Now when I make use of these two table name with this condition, it's an indication that now I am having a table. This becomes, that means this becomes one big table where it contains the attributes of both the tables, by comparing the corresponding tuple values based on the condition as what we have specified here, right? So now definitely if the table contains the attributes of both the table movie and as well as the director, means the director having a director name, so just display it. So D name is the director name. No, go through it, guys. D name from where? From director table, director D dot D name. That's it, right? So let me go with recalling the same query. So what additional things to be made here? To this table, add a one more table to get a director name. So director D, fine. Then after this, write a common attribute condition, M dot DID is equal to D dot DID. This is a condition. Always this kind of condition and attribute to be written in a where class, right? So where we have written, look at this one, guys. So we have written have written where m dot did is equal to d dot did, fine. Then after this I want to display the name, right? I want to display the name. Name taken from where? From director table. Director means what? D dot d name, that's it. Then put semicolon, comma, that's it, enter. We got answer, 10 means Rajesh, 11 means Mahesh. Look at this one, 10 Rajesh, 11 Mahesh. We got answer, fine. So definitely you come to know that again one more example for a group by class. Why I took this example is, even we can able to make use of a group by class by joining two tables, that also possible. Suppose few of my friends having a question, sir, it's whether I need to go with grouping based on a m.did. First I want to, because in the where class we joined two tables, can we group based on the d.did, that means director table did? Sure, we can do it, then also we will get the same answer, because this condition always makes us to get the things from both the tables, right? So for that, where all that MID of movie table, DID of movie table should be equal to the DID of director table, then only it lists, right? So for that, writing of any DID in the group by class, either a movie table DID or director DID, it doesn't make any changes, right? So we'll get a same answer, that's it. Look at this one, guys. Here I made D dot DID. But the major thing to be learned here is, to know about here is, first we have to identify from which based on which attribute I want to group the things, right? Then what aggregate functions to make use, and aggregate functions to be applied on which attribute, that always we need to find out, right? This is what an important thing. Fine. So let me go one step further now. Now I want to find out I want to write one more query for one more problem. Let me take up, for example, for this itself, just a slight modification of this query. I'll tell you the problem statement. I want to find out the director who directed, carefully listen to things. I want to find out the director who directed at least 2 movies. What's the question I have asked? Director who directed at least 2 movies. At least 2 means it should be at least greater than, or at least to equal to 2 or greater than 2. That means greater than or equal to 2. Which one? Count. That count of movies should be greater than or equal to 2. Only such kind of a persons I want to list, guys. That means I want to retrieve the directors along with their details who have directed at least 2 movies. So what's the thing to be written? Could be we are with half of the answer here as part of this query, right? Because this query itself contains our answer, but along with that it contains some additional things also. For example, here directors, can we find out which are the directors directed at least 2 movies? As per this answer, as what we obtained from based on the data as what we are having in a movie table and as well as the director table. So we come to know that the 10 Rajesh, that is 2 movies, right, has directed. This is what a right answer, because 2 is greater than or equal to 2, right? The condition becomes true. So only thing is this is okay. Then 11 Mahesh 1, this is okay, right? So this is what the thing I don't want to display as part of this query, right? That means retrieve the directors who have directed at least 2 movies, right? So that means for a same queries, right, that means the answer, half of the answer is already there, right? So to this query itself, if I added some more logic, right, one more condition, definitely we'll get an answer, right? So that means first, even for this query also, what to make? First, each director directed how many movies? First we count, right? This is what a condition to be written. As part of this answer, we'll get director 10 DID, 10 and 11, 2 groups. So 10 connected with movie ID 1 and 2, 11 connected with the movie ID 3, that we have written already, right? This one. So 10 connected with 1 and 2, then 11 connected with 3. Then what we did is we counted these 2 things, right? We created a group and we counted, and this count gives count, right? Count based on movie ID. So 2 and this is 1, count as 1. But the next step, this count should be greater than or equal to what? 2. Then during that time, this row only lives. That means to this part of a picture, for that we have written already that code. But only one thing to be added, that is whether count of MID is greater than or equal to 2. So definitely that means all my friends are guessing, sir, write one condition by using count of, what is that? This count of m dot did, this count, right? So m dot did should be greater than or equal to 2, sir, right? This we have to write, at least 2, fine, we can write. But where to write? This is what a question. Whether to write it in a select class, from class, where class, group by class. Few of my friends definitely might give an answer like this. Sir, conditions, already you told, if any condition if I want to write, especially in a retrieval query in SQL, always write it in a where class. So for that, let me write it in a where class. What happens? Whether where class permits us to write these kind of conditions in the where class, we'll verify it, right? So let me check, friends. Already I'm having a where class. So let me write, I'll make a space. So for that, I'll write it in the next line, group by d.did. Already I'm having the same thing I'm writing. So this part of thing, that means this part of a code already we have written. The one more thing, additional thing I want to add is that count should be greater than or equal to 2. Only this condition I want to write. So this is what a statement I want to add it here. So what is that? Count of m dot did should be greater than or equal to 2. Condition I have written. Already we have written one condition, I want to check for both the conditions to be true. If I want to make both the conditions to be true, what to be added? I want to concatenate both the conditions. That means I want to merge both the conditions. So for that, we need to write which one? And m dot did and this condition also to be true, evaluated as true, evaluated to true, and even this also to be evaluated to true. If only both are true, then only retrieve such kind of a tuple. That we can write. This is what our assumptions find. And not only assumption, even things are right. We have written that count and this common attribute condition where in the where class. Let me check whether it works or not. Almost this part of a query we are having. To this query, we need to add one more thing in the where class, right? This is what a where class. In the where class, we'll try to go for adding and what is the next condition? Count of m dot did, fine, should be greater than or equal to 2. That means at least 2. We have written, we have added this additional thing, additional code. Look at this one. Additional thing we have added, right? So let me check whether it works or not. Oh, there is a some error message, it is displaying error. What is the error message? Let me check. Invalid use of group by function. But group by function we have viewed, group function. Already earlier, it is not showing any error. We have viewed successfully, we are successful in making use of a group by and mention the attribute as what we have written in a group by. It all works, right? It's all working. We are getting an answer. But now it's showing an error. Why, any guesses? Oh, error we get only after including this part of a code, right? Once after including this part of a code, now it is showing this is error. This is not permitted. When I take out this one, definitely this works. Look at this one, guys. We have seen it already. When I take out, then definitely this works. But this doesn't gives me a right answer, exact answer as what we have expected, because we want only this one, because this is the only person who is directed 2 movies. So what is the solution? It's an indication that this count is okay, but the position as where we have written, this is not a right position. It's an indication that though the where class supports us to write an aggregate function, right? That means where class supports us to write a condition, but it fails to evaluate a conditions which contains an aggregate function. That means if any conditions which are written on an aggregate function, we cannot write. That means where class doesn't permit us to write conditions on aggregate function. Please make a note of it, guys. Where class doesn't permit us to write conditions on aggregate functions. That means aggregate functions cannot be used on the where class. That means we cannot write conditions on aggregate functions. These are very important thing. Please make a note of it. Could be, it will help you in interviews, right? Fine. Then where to write? Without writing, checking this condition, I cannot get that as expected answer, as that means as what we have expected. We won't get it. To get it, SQL provides us one more beautiful class that we called by name a having class. There's one more class it provides that we called by name having class. Especially this having class is mainly meant for checking conditions. Checking conditions on what? Conditions on aggregate function. This is what a situation where we made without until and unless checking an condition on this aggregate function, that means without writing count of m dot did greater than or equal to 2, we cannot get an answer for this query, right? So for that, to write this kind of condition, we are having a one more class, because where fails to check conditions, these kind of conditions, right, where it has used an aggregate function. To overcome from this, we are having a class called having. So having, either you can make use of all lowercase or uppercase, no issues. So then write this condition. What's the condition, guys? Having count of m dot mid, number of movies, should be greater than or equal to 2. That's it. It works. Let me check, guys. Till this much we have written. Then additional thing to be added is having group by did. Group by did we have written. Then after that, go with having one conditions to be written. What is that? Count of m dot mid should be greater than or equal to 2. That's it. Enter. Look at this one. We got answer, right? Earlier we got error. Now we got a answer. Additional thing we added is the having class. So from this we learned one thing. Where class doesn't permit us to write conditions on aggregate function. But in the where class we can write multiple conditions, but what? But it is only on the attributes of the table, right? But not on aggregate functions. Aggregate functions we cannot write. And one more, few of my friends are having a question, could be like this. So in the having class is mainly meant for checking conditions on aggregate functions, right? So if required, we'll make use of it. Fine. So few of my friends having a question like this. Sir, anyway in the having class we are writing a condition, let me write why to make use of this where class with this condition, let me add this also in the having class. Can we do it? And concat with and m dot did equal to d dot did and count of m dot mid is greater than or equal to 2. Can we write like this? No, guys, we cannot write, because in the having class it doesn't permit us to write that conditions on these conditions of this kind. That means where it's not an aggregate function, right? We have not used any aggregate function here. So such kind of conditions we cannot write it in a having class. Let me check, guys. Having count of, this is what a query we have written, count of m dot mid should be greater than or equal to 2 we have written. Then along with that we have written one more condition in the end. What is that? We are planning to write one condition. What is that? I said it doesn't works. Let me check. What is this one? Where m dot did equal to d dot did. M dot did should be equal to d dot did. Right? We have written. And followed by this condition. Now I want to take out this where class part. Whether it works or not, we'll check. Because once if standards, that means which class permits what and in which order to write, once if it is there in our mind, then definitely we can solve any kind of a query just by having a logic, right? So let me go with that. So 10 Rajesh 3, we are getting a different answer. Do you have a director who directed 3 movies? No, we are having a 10. Rajesh who directed only 2 movies, but now it is giving 3, So whether any values newly inserted, let me check in the select star movie. Sorry. No, we are having still 10 with 2 movies and 11 with 1 movie, but it is giving me an answer like 3, that query. That means adding of these general conditions in the having class instead of a where class. That means what exactly happening actually here? Here it considering the whole table as a single group and it is counting that MIDs. How many MIDs we are having? 3 MIDs, 1, 2, 3, right? So all thing becomes a one single group. Instead of for each director, it doesn't making a separate group, right? This is what is going to happen, right? So please be careful, especially all aggregate function conditions to be written in a having class, and writing of these common attribute condition in a having class doesn't solve our problem, right? Fine. Then let me go with writing one more query. So prior to that, select attributes and aggregate function from table names, then where general attribute conditions which are there in a table, right? On such table attributes we can write a conditions. Then group by class, it is to group, create a group, and on each group applying some aggregate function. And conditions on aggregate function make use of having class, right? So this is what the 5 different classes of SQL. Now guys, I'll try to write one more simple query. So we'll try to improve our logic, right? So what I want to find out is, I want to retrieve, could be in the last session I've asked this question, retrieve the details of a director who is having a second highest age. For example, select start from director, I'll take up. Retrieve the director who is having a second highest age. As part of this query, we are having an answer, right? You know, what is the right answer? 18. 41 is the second highest, first highest age, maximum age. Second maximum is what? 20. That means 20 Rajesh, and this I want to display. What to do? We know how to get a first highest. That means a maximum value with the help of max aggregate function. Do we have any built-in aggregate function where I can retrieve a second highest value, second biggest? No guys, we don't have any such things. So instead of that, by using a max function itself, is there any way with applying a few more logic till now as what we have learned? It's a time for checking our learnings guys, right? So let me check. That means how can I get that second highest? What else we can do? Any guesses? It requires a director table. From a director table, we'll try to pick a maximum value. Can we pick a maximum from a director table? Yes. How to pick a maximum from a director table? Select maximum age. Select max of what? Age column. Max of age column. Fine. So which table to be used? From director. Let me write from director D. If you want D dot age, you can write if required, no issues. So this gives me a maximum age. Let me check. Select max of age D dot age from director D. We have written. Fine, you know, we are getting 41. Fine. But I don't want a maximum. What I want is the second highest out of this in the column. So for that, what I can do is, I'll make use of this logic guys. Now I want to retrieve the director table details where it doesn't contains this maximum age. Can we do? That means, remember, outcome of this one what? Max of age. This is what? Max of D dot age. What is that? 41. This is what the output. What I'll do is, in the outer part, now I want to display all details of directors. The director doesn't contains a person who are all with the age of 41. Suppose if I am having a multiple person with this maximum age, that is with 41, then all such persons should not be displayed. This is what my interest. Can we achieve it? How I can do guys? So I want to display all directors. How can I display all directors? Go to director table. Go to director means from director. I can write from director D, super. Then there I want to display all details. All details means, let me write star. Fine. Then after this, where this display, when I write select star from director, then it displays me everything. Can I able to write select star from director? This already we know it. Displays me all the things. But what I want is this display should not contain the maximum list. That means maximum director age list, right? So that should not be there. So what I can do? To do that, what I can do is I need to write some condition. What is that? This display should not contains age should not be equal to this one. I can write, right? Should not be this age of this director d dot age should not be equal to what? The maximum age. That I can do, this is a condition I am writing. So where to write? Always to be written in a where class. General condition, fine. So suddenly few of my friends might think like this, sir, this where class contains a max kind of an aggregate function. Yes, max kind of an aggregate function. But this max aggregate function written where? It has written in a select class. Select permits us to write this aggregate function. But it is connected with where class, Yes, where class. But during its execution, always what? The inner query will be executed. So for that, once if inner query will be executed, then it is ready with some answer. That means this is the outcome of, the 41 is an outcome of the whole query, right? So then it becomes one value, one integer value, then it compares it with this integer value. It doesn't think that this as an aggregate function, right? So though it is an aggregate function, it's a part of a subquery, right? Actually it is not directly, this max of d dot age, this kind of an aggregate function is not directly used in a where class. We are using indirectly. That means we are feeding from a subquery, right? So these things are permitted always. How exactly it will work, guys? It goes to the first row and picks a value. What is the value? 20. Now 20 is not equal to 41. Sure. Then it displays this one. Then control moves to the next row. What is that? 41. That is 11 Mahesh 41. Then it picks this 41 and checks. Is that 41 not equal to this 41? 41 not equal to 41. No, condition fails. So for that it doesn't displace. Then moves to the next row, that is 18. 18 not equal to 41. Yes, then it displays even 81. This also, sorry, 18 also, right? That's it. Let me check. Select star from director. This is what a one query. Then one more query we have written is select maximum of age from where? From director. Maximum age gives me a maximum value, but I don't want a maximum. I want a list of directors which doesn't contain this maximum age director list, right? So such kind of persons I don't want to have there. So to do that, age should not be equal to the maximum age, or few should be less than, we can write that also be there, right? That also okay. Why I am writing a not equal to means because anyway we are having only one maximum age. That means not one person. Always the maximum value is only one thing, right? Though we are having hundreds of persons with a same maximum age, then during that time also it retrieves me only one value, right? So once if subquery returns only one value, I can make use of not equal to. That means equal to and not equal to, having a capability to compare the two values, right? Not the multi-set results retrieved from a subquery. But as part of this example, our subquery, that means the inner query returning only one value. So for that, if one value comparison, our not equal to or equal to, these kind of operators says yes, I can do it, right? So for that I am writing not equal to, or even if I make use of not in, even that also works. Or we are looking for ages which are less than this maximum. So for that even you can make use of less than this 41, that also okay. So let me check. Fine, we are getting 2018. We don't have a 41. 41 is taken out, right? Possible. What else we can do is it should be even less than maximum age. This also gives the same answer. Or that outer query should not contains not in this maximum age, whether this age not in the list of this maximum age, because not in can work with multi-set results, always meant for using to deal with multi-set results of a subquery. Sure, it works. We have seen in the previous session. Yes, it's working, fine. But this is okay, this is accurate. Again, that's a question. Because we require a maximum age. Could be, yes, few of my friends with some answer. What is that, So, from this table, maximum is 41. So, now in this table, the outcome of this result as what we are having, the maximum is 20, displaying this one is itself is enough. That means to this answer, from this answer we want to pick a maximum, then definitely this becomes a 20. Then to original table, the 20 itself is a maximum, that's it, right. So let me go to the table, there I will write max of age, that's it, fine, we are getting a 20. Or you may go with this condition, any condition you want, with also things it works. Not in or age should be less than this, anything you can make use of, 20. Less than that, the maximum is, less than that maximum 41 age is 20 and 18. Then from 20 and 18, when I go with picking a maximum, then it gives me the first one, that is a 20, right, fine. When I want to print a corresponding names, then I will go with home. That is that means to a D name, there is a front, the initial part of our query. Let me write D name, and if you want display DID possible, you can, okay, 10 Rajesh with 20 in displaying answer. But actually with maximum always it picks the first one, but the Rajesh, once this tuple lies in between, then it doesn't work. So for that, what to do is, we know that there is a bug of MySQL. To solve this, what else we can do is pick a maximum age. This gives me a 20. Then in the outer query, look at this one. Try to get me, that means out of this not equal to, or you may write less than anything is okay, fine, where d.age should be less than this maximum age. Then after this, retrieve the maximum age in the directed table. Now this contains a max of age. What's the value we are having actually here? Here we are having for this query 41 is a maximum. From less than or equal to 41 means it lists the values of 20 and 18. Between 20 and 18, what is the maximum? 20 is the maximum. Then I want its corresponding name. To get that, this query I have written inside this outer query. Then this query I am nesting with a one more query, right? That means this I want to make to be enclosed by some other query. There I will write who are all the persons, because it always, when displaying a name, it always picks me the first one, the first row corresponding value. To avoid this problem, where I will write where age is equal to, look at this one, where age should be equal to, because this maximum is always a single value, either you can make use of in or equal to, no issues, age equal to, where to write? In the where class. Let me write where, fine, look at this one guys, where age is equal to this one, where to write? From director, then what next? I want to display the respective details, select star from director, where age should be equal to this new second maximum age, that's it, fine, let me write. So from this we learned one interesting thing guys, one query, again one query, and out of this, above this, there is a one more query. So which is a query to be executed initially? First, the first query to be executed is this one. Next, this output of this query becomes an input for this query, right? This will be feeded to, that means feeded to this its outer query, enclosed query, and this output becomes an input for its outer query, right? So we went with 3 levels of nesting, right? 1, 2, 3, right? So like that we can go with n levels of nesting. That means this is what the beauty of these nested queries, right? We can write a query, that means take a bigger problem, it's a divide and conquer, that's it. Divide a bigger problem into small chunk, right? Then the outcome of that problem result, you feed it to its next problem, right? So for that, try to conquer it later, right? So this is what we are doing, fine. Let me go with extracting this one. This is first level of nesting, is second level of nesting is over here, fine. second maximum age I am getting, probably we are getting, right. Now I want to display its respective name. So for that, what condition to be written is this maximum age should be equal to the age of the table. So yaradall are 20, who are all having an age like 20, then all such persons will be displayed. Select star from director, right, where age equal to this one. Look at this one interesting thing, in every part of a inner query we are supposed to make use of, that means we can make use of select from where group by having all such things I can make use in each of the thing, right, possible. Look at this one, 10 Rajesh 20 will get answer. Though the Rajesh, that means the 10 Rajesh, that means the second maximum lies anywhere in my table, it retrieves me a right answer always, right. So fine. Next, from this we learned that how we can nest queries, that means one contains other, and this kind of query, and this is a subquery, and again this become a subquery, but it is an outer query of this, then this we called by name the outer query, the outermost query, right. So these are all the subqueries, right. From this we learned how to perform this nesting, then how to connect queries, especially during nesting, that all we have learned, right. So thank you guys. In the next session I will come up with one more interesting topic of SQL with a few more logic. Prior to that I am having one question. In the same fashion, try to pick a second minimum. What else to do? So replace max by a minimum, right, that we can make up, or you can go with finding a third highest, right. So these kind of a thing, right, what to do, right. Thank you for your patience listening, right.